What is going on, guys? Matt Downs with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports here to give you the edge for this NBA 5-game slate on DraftKings. Cannot wait to break it down, and I am glad last night is over. I personally did absolutely horrible. Let's go ahead and go over my lineups. This is the first part of all my videos, and I will be doing this going forward. But before we jump into my results from last night, which were probably the worst I've had in a long time, I want to go over PrizePicks, one of our best partners here at dgfantasy.com. It's a fantasy sports app where you simply hit the over or under on any certain fantasy point projection. You can also mix this in with other fantasy sports. If you look here at the top, they have pretty much everything under the sun. Not only that, I give away a free PrizePick pick at the very end of every single free video that I do, my favorite overall picks. And I also gave away one on my NFL Showdown video if you guys want to go ahead and give that a watch right now. All you have to do is sign up using code DGF for a 100% matchup to $100. Helps us out, helps you guys out, and you get a free $100. And I say this every single video. If you guys just want to sign up, get the free $100 in promo, play with it, see if you like the app. You can never play, you don't have to play it ever again after that if you guys lose all your money and free promo money. It's just free money, so go ahead and test it out. And it is one of the easiest ways to play daily fantasy sports today. That being said, let's go ahead and recap my last night's success. Or not success. I did the 20 max, and I limited my exposure to a lot of the teams that weren't involved in any injury news. Teams I did have a lot of exposure to were the Miami Heat and Clippers. Knowing that information, you guys should already assume that I did very, very bad. I set my minimum exposure of 2 players to each one of those teams, and the guys that were supposed to get heavy minutes just didn't. I expected a lot of fourth quarter run from Reggie Jackson, from Marcus Morris. Man, like all those guys should have had very high ceilings in that game, and it just didn't pan out. Same thing with the Miami Heat. Like guys like Kyle Lowry, I was very overweight on because, again, they were only showing like 9% owned in GPPs, and I thought that was crazy because I knew he was going to get a ton of minutes. Same thing with Tyler Hero. He underperformed, and that was because of a blowout. So I obviously did horrible in pretty much every contest. I had that same kind of assumption in my single entry, and let's actually just kind of recap my single entry. 225 out of 437, which actually wasn't that bad. I finished in the 55th percentile, so if you technically want to treat that as a double up, I almost cashed. But this is my single entry lineup, and I'll show you my process and why I picked these players. And please ignore the Anthony Edwards call. That was my last play, or that was my last pick here in this lineup. But Tyler Hero at 40% owned, again, plenty of run, should have done very, very well, and ended up being one of the chalkier guys on the slate in terms of a pay-up option. Trey Mann. This guy I was fuming over. He ended up playing, 32 minutes as a starter, and he was $3,500. Came out and hit a three-pointer. I think he ended up scoring 7.5 points after the first quarter, so I was like, yeah, he should easily hit value here. Ended up with 13 fantasy points, and I know a lot of you took Trey Mann, so you guys were tilting with me, but that's crazy. He doesn't show as a snowflake, but that definitely should be a snowflake, only scoring 13 points at 3.5K. Regardless, he's on the slate tonight, so we'll talk about him here in a little bit. Anthony Edwards, again, was my very last piece. I knew I was going to regret this, but he plays a lot of minutes. He was at 1.6% ownership. I was fine with taking that, and he actually did fantastic in the first quarter. Ended up with like 16 points. So I was looking really, really good there after the first quarter. I was looking really good after the first quarter with a lot of these plays. And Giannis was my one guy. He was a bit on the chalky side for obvious reasons. The highest over-under, it was either him or Jokic. I picked right there. Scored 70 points, so obviously did very well there. Dedmon was an obvious play. Ended up scoring off the charts, and this was not even a relatively close game. And they only scored 85 points, which obviously screwed me with the other Heat players like Tyler Hero and Kyle Lowry in my 20 max. But this is what really hurt me here at the bottom section. I was actually teetering on that line of cashing and not cashing after these top players did end up playing. And I knew these guys were coming in at relatively lower ownership, talking about Marcus Morris and Eric Bledsoe. Reggie Jackson, not so much. He was one of the more obvious plays on the slate. But these guys just didn't see the minute upside that they were supposed to. And after the first quarter, again, these guys were doing just fine, and they just didn't perform. So I'm going to be prioritizing minutes over everything. You guys know that. And my process was right. It just didn't pan out. And I really didn't do too bad. Just looking at these scores overall, I really didn't need too much from these last players to cash. It just didn't happen. So again, gonna trust the process, gonna take hard stances on any one of my GPPs. Just because they didn't perform doesn't mean that my process was incorrect. The ownership was there. I got different in a bunch of different spots with high upside. Again, just didn't pan out. But I also want to show you guys that we do have some really good GPP plays that we called last night, and I just want to show you some of the success that we had in our premium Discord chat. These are members who have been in their chat for a while, and you can only have access to the Discord chat and some of our GPP plays, of course, if you are a member of DG Fantasy. Only $20 a month gives you access to all of our favorite GPP plays, cash plays, cores, leverage spots, all that good stuff. But let's take a look at some of our winners. This person took down a GPP with Brogdon, Hero, Tate. Tate was the guy who got additional run. He was one of our favorite GPP options. Just didn't expect him to explode because obviously Kevin Porter Jr. and Wood were both out. He actually scored as much as Giannis. That's insane to say out loud. We also had some close takedown success here. $10 in the 45, first out of 5 different places. $10 in the 70. Great job there with contest selection, more importantly. Turned, I believe this was $100 in the $1,200. Congrats to this guy. I need to give an emoji there. And then we had a close takedown. This guy almost won $10,000, almost had 100K, was sitting in that 1st to 4 range for a majority of the night because he did stack the early games. Turned $105 into $1,900, $20 and $106. He had a fantastic night overall. Then we had some more success here, $30 in the 75. TJ, the man, did have a single entry lineup, score 271. And we had a ton of success overall as a community. I just did not. Looks like I got too chalky. But again, we had a lot of good GPP calls last night. If you guys are interested in signing up, all the links are below in the description. But now let's go ahead and focus on this NBA 5-game slate. We have a lot of pending injury news and a lot of solidified injury news, but let's go with what we know as of right now and go game by game, team by team, and then I will go over building a lineup with my favorite plays here on the slate. Starting out with Chicago, we have Kobe White and Patrick Williams out. Javonte Green got the start last game and did play 35 minutes, so we will be paying attention to that Chicago picture. With the Knicks, we have RJ Barrett. He's questionable if he is ruled out. That will shake up some of the minutes here and usage for the starting lineup. With the Milwaukee Bucks, we do have DiVincenzo, Brook Lopez, Ojale still out for them. Doesn't really impact the picture because they have been out for quite some time. With Toronto, we have Gary Trent, who is questionable. He was questionable last game and ruled out. Did give some minutes to some of the starting lineup here. Van Vliet played 42 minutes. We have Scotty Barnes, who played 38. Siakam played 37. So all of these starters did get tremendous amount of minutes. So I do love the minute upside there. We will be focusing on that picture, especially if Gary Trent is ruled out yet again. With OKC, we have Favors, Giddey, and Cambridge Williams still out for them. Some of these price tags didn't come up enough. We'll be focusing here on the OKC Thunder. Now focusing on this Memphis picture, John Morant is still out, and I don't think the price tags came up enough here for the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, we're talking, $500 max for each one of these players. But they're also getting very good minutes without John Morant on the court, and they all get a nice little usage bump. We will be paying attention to that Memphis Grizzlies picture here in a bit. With Detroit, Kelly Olynyk is still out. Doesn't really impact that picture. Now with Phoenix, Devin Booker is officially out, and I assume they sat him because they are playing the Detroit Pistons. They are still favored by 12 points. This is a 210.5 over-under, and a lot of usage to go around this Phoenix Suns team. A lot of these guys will be chalky. And then last but not least, we have the late night hammer here starting at 10 o'clock. My San Antonio Spurs against Portland. Nothing really going on with San Antonio. With Portland, we have Damian Lillard and Nasir Little officially out. Now, there is a tremendous amount of interest here in the Portland Trailblazers, at least according to the industry right now. Guys like McCollum get a nice little boost in usage. Same thing with McCollum. And we will be covering that entire picture here once we get to the lineup building portion of this video. And now we will go ahead and jump into this. So let's go with what we know and focus on the price tags of all of these players here, going game by game, team by team, starting out with the Chicago Bulls. Nothing really too interesting here with the Chicago Bulls. As you guys remember, Vooch was out for a little bit, and now that the price tags have been adjusted to reflect him being out, they still haven't come back down. So like DeRozan's still 9K, Zach LaVine 8.8, Vooch 9.3, and he does deserve that price tag because he did have a very good game and did break the slate wide open a couple slates ago. But guys like Lonzo Ball still 7.2, Alex Caruso still at 5.2, so we're still waiting on these price tags to come back down. But one guy I do want to talk about here is Javonte Green, and right now he's not showing the highest ownership, and he's not the best fantasy point per minute player, and he had a 3.7% usage rate last game. But that being said, he played 36 minutes, was in the starting rotation. If he continues to start and plays 36 minutes, he still hit value at 18.75. I will continue to play this guy, especially in larger GPPs, and I'll be overexposed to him. So Javonte Green, 3.4K. If he's going to play 35 plus minutes and he's going to be in the starting lineup, sign me up for him, at least in GPPs. I think he's a very sneaky GPP option. Again, he's not showing crazy ownership, and I really do like him. Switching down to the New York Knicks, these guys are going to be all GPP plays for me again. Julius Randle, 9.5K. We know the minute upsides there. Again, not benefiting really with too many injury news. RJ Barrett's the only questionable guy, and that's really only going to impact a few players. Like Evan Fournier should get a little boost in minutes, and the rotations are pretty solidified here for them. Alec Burks did play a good amount of minutes. Now that we know Kemba Walker is out of the lineup, we get a good sample size of what to expect, and the minute upside's always going to be there, at least going forward here for Alec Burks. 6.5K is still very much undervalued, and I do like him for GBPs, and also the fact that he plays small forward. He's point guard and small forward eligible. That is huge for lineup construction, so I'm going to be all over Alec Burks again for GBPs, but the rest of these guys not really drawing too much interest. Derrick Rose is another guy that's been benefiting here without Kemba Walker in the rotation. He did play 35 minutes. I don't think he continues to see that many minutes, but I do think we have a nice little floor of about 25 to 28 minutes here for Derrick Rose going forward. That being said, he's historically a good fantasy point per minute player, just under 1 fantasy point, so I do like him here in GPPs as well. But I'm still not locking in anybody from these two games, or from these two teams. And then we get over to Milwaukee. These guys went absolutely insane last night just because it was a high-scoring game. Giannis was the obvious play, and he's going to be the obvious, or probably one of the higher ceiling potential guys here on the slate. I still don't think he's going to carry that much ownership here. There's not too many crazy good value plays for him to really warrant any high ownership. So I consider him more of a GPP play, and as you can see here, all the price tags did come up across the board. One guy that didn't get a price increase is Chris Middleton. He went down from 7.4K to 7.2. So I also like the mid-range pricing for him. I think he's a great GPP option. This isn't as good of a matchup here versus Toronto, obviously, but he will definitely be under-owned. And the price tags are a little bit too expensive for me across the board here. Not too much interest, and they really aren't benefiting without any injuries. They've had the same injuries here for like the past month. Now, switching over to the Toronto picture, Toronto is really going to be dependent on whether Gary Trent does play. If Gary Trent actually plays, I do like him. Love them in the upside here with all the starters. They've been playing on very thin rotations, and honestly, they're all averaging pretty much the exact same fantasy points per minute, like all around that 1 threshold. So take a stab here, any one of these guys. Last game, it was Scotty Barnes for me, and I actually played him, averaging 0.97 fantasy points per minute here without Dragic, Anunoby, and Birch in the lineup. And Gary Trent is right below that here, averaging 0.87 fantasy points per minute. And then it goes in order, like Van Vliet's the highest, the best fantasy point per minute player here at 1.13, and Siakam 1.03. So I don't consider any one of these guys core options, but I do think, the upside's there. Obviously a good matchup. It's going to be a higher pace matchup for them. And Van Vliet did burn a lot of people last game, so he just won't carry that ownership. And also his price tag did go up. So I do like these guys for GPPs. I just don't think that they're going to become obvious plays, at least in the industry's eyes, just because of the price tags. I think with maybe the exception of Gary Trent, he could find it into my lineup. But again, I'm not locking in anybody from this Toronto team until we hear that Gary Trent news. Now we're going to start to switch over to some more obvious plays here with OKC. This team is without Josh Giddey, and they have tremendous minute upside here, and the price tags make a lot of sense. So talking about guys like SGA 8.1K, I usually hate SGA. Last game, he played 38 minutes and did break the slate, and this was last night. So if you had SGA, you looked fantastic. And they're playing in the pace-up spot here versus Memphis. Definitely don't mind him. He's definitely more of a GPP option. Again, 8.1K is still a little bit too pricey for me. But one guy that's not pricey for me, and I called this on the stream, or at least on the video yesterday, Lou Dort. Lou Dort's going to break the slates going forward. I can almost tell you that. I can almost guarantee you that, just because the amount of minutes that he plays, and he's taking a lot of shots. He's still putting up, double-digit shot attempts every single game. 13, 10, 14, 19, 16. And we know he's not the best shooter, but at least he's getting the volume up. So if he has a good shooting performance, it reminds me of a poor man's Anthony Edwards. So it's really going to come down to roster construction, but the one good thing about Lou Dort is that he's also guard and forward eligible. So I do like him. Honestly, I don't know if I'm going to land on him, but I do love the upside here. He is showing some ownership. So again, I think it's just coming down to roster construction. But one guy we have to talk about here is going to be Robinson Earl and Trey Mann. These guys are very cheap at their price tags. It looks like somebody just subscribed. Robinson Earl at 4.4K did get the start and did play 34 minutes. The Thunder love this guy. This guy has been crushing. He's averaging 0.97 fantasy points a minute here to start the season. And it looks like without Josh Giddey on the court, he is playing in that thinner rotation. So I honestly want to get on Robinson Earl so much, and especially in GPPs. If he's going to show lower ownership, 4.4K, I'm definitely going to love the upside there with Robinson Earl at 4.4K. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in my lineup. I don't know if I'm going to end up locking him in, but another guy I'm going to go back to the well with is going to be Trey Mann, especially if he does start. The one thing I also love about Trey Mann is he's point guard, shooting guard eligible. $3,600 if he's going to see 35 plus minutes. Same thing there with Javonte Green. However, Trey Mann's going to have the ball in his hands a lot more than Javonte Green, obviously, because Javonte Green has a 3.7% usage rate. If we take a look at Trey Mann's usage, he posted a 22.3% usage rate last night and shot 4 of 13. So the shooting performance really hindered him. I just really like him. The minutes make sense, the usage makes sense, and he has a lot of upside here specifically on this slate. So if he's carrying lower ownership, he's only showing 25.1% ownership right now, which is teetering on the line of a cash/GPP category. Really like Trey Mann. I'm going to lock him in, especially in GPPs. I'm still on the fence about Lou Dort, but those guys really stand out to me. I think you can attack this OKC team here, especially playing on a back-to-back. This game should be relatively competitive here with the Memphis Grizzlies. Switching over to the Memphis Grizzlies, these guys' price tags did not come up as much as I expected. Jaren Jackson absolutely crushing it, averaging 1.38 fantasy points per minute here without the current injuries on the court. Dylan Brooks is another guy, fantasy point per minute wise, that's been balling out 7K. But again, price tags just don't make sense to me in terms of the industry, especially when it comes to lineup construction. But I love all these guys. Bane was one of my favorite GPP plays last slate. Did play 33 minutes, got to 37 points, so did hit his price tag and then some. And then also Tyus Jones here at 5.5K. Didn't get to the price point that we wanted him to, but did play 34 minutes. So the minute upside will always be here without Ja Morant. And, you know, these guys are making for some awkward price tags as of right now. Really nobody's going to be landing on them. So I do like that. Steven Adams is another guy that's been balling out here without Ja Morant on the court. Fantasy point per minute wise, he's averaging close to 1.2. It's just a minute upside with him. You know, he's playing anywhere from 20 to 25, 30 minutes sometimes. So it's just all over the place. Do like him for GPPs, especially in this matchup here versus Robinson Earl. Switching over to the Detroit Pistons, really not in love with any one of these plays. Cunningham at 7.9 is a little overpriced. Jeremy Grant at 7.3. Sadiq Bey at 5.5. He was chalkier last slate and only played 26 minutes. So obviously a lot of people were bummed out in that. I didn't like him last slate either. And then Isaiah Stewart did get another price increase here to 5K. So really not too much interest at all here in these Detroit Pistons outside of bigger GPPs. Plus, it's not the best matchup against one of the better defensive teams in the NBA with the Phoenix Suns. Talking about the Phoenix Suns, Chris Paul is going to be chalky. Obviously, he has a lot of usage here. I think he's a very safe pay-up option here. I'm going to go ahead and lock him in. Let me get Trey Mann out. Chris Paul, put Chris Paul in. Why is he putting him in at the guard? I guess because he's one of the later starting games. I'm going to put in Trey Mann. I don't know why it's doing it that way. Anyway, I want him in the shooting guard position because he's shooting guard eligible. Regardless, with the Phoenix Suns, it's going to be Chris Paul. Ayton gets a slight bump in usage. Same thing with pretty much all these players. But the one guy that's going to be showing a lot of ownership and that it's going to be playing over 30 minutes, at least he should here, and is expected to start, is going to be Shamet. Shamet at 3.1K. I know it's not sexy, but again, the minutes are going to be there. He's actually performing decent based on what he's done in the past, averaging 0.76 fantasy points a minute here and a 16.3% usage, which, if you guys can believe it, is actually higher than what he's been historically. So I do think you have to lock him in. He's also showing a decent amount of ownership. He's going to be relatively chalky, and I think Chris Paul and Shamet are the obvious plays from this team. Then last but not least, we do get to the late night hammer. Not too much interest on the San Antonio Spurs side. However, DeJounte Murray, you obviously can't ignore him. Is going to have to step it up big time here versus Portland. They are the underdog by 4 points. This should be a competitive matchup, and it is a slight pace-up spot for these guys. So if you want a good pay-up option that's going to be very low owned, it's going to be DeJounte Murray at 9.8K. But I'm probably not going to end up landing on him at least in one lineup. And the rest of these guys, they get price increases, like Jakob Poeltl went from 5.5 or 5.7K to 6.1. Derek White's been bumping around in that 5K range. He's now at 6.3, which he should have been a long time ago. But the rest of these guys don't have too much interest in here from the Spurs outside of bigger GBPs. Last but not least, the Portland Trailblazers. CJ McCollum's one of the chalkier guys in the slate. Another guy you should pretty much lock in. 8.5K is not the price tag I love from him. I loved him at a 7.5 to 8K range. But again, 8.5K, he should be getting the bulk of the shots here, especially without Damian Lillard in the lineup. Of course, the rest of these Portland plays are going to be really dependent here on Norman Powell, whether he plays or not. Right now, he's questionable. If he does play, I do actually like Norman Powell at 5.4K. He does get a slight bump in usage, and the rest of these players do. But he always will be guaranteed minutes. But if Norman Powell does sit, and regardless of if he plays or not, Simons is pretty much guaranteed minutes. However, the one thing with Simons is he's only point guard, shooting guard eligible, which I'm going to go back to this point here. That's why I think Trey Mann is going to be lower owned, and I think he's a fantastic pivot because as you can see here, I have way too many guards in my lineup. Chris Paul might be the odd man out, or Trey Mann, depending on my lineup construction, but you're going to have to get rid of one of these two guys. I'm just in love with Trey Mann, and it's going to force me to pay up if I do get rid of Chris Paul and I decide to go Simons, because it's going to leave me with $8,500 to pay through 3 spots. But again, you're going to have to decide between one of those two. I think Chris Paul is also a fantastic option, assuming the game does stay close, of course. And another guy that's showing decent ownership and is the more obvious center pay-up option here on the slate is going to be Nurkic. The one thing with Nurkic, and I said it last slate, I just don't get the upside in terms of the minutes. They will continue to play him less than, about 30, 32 minutes, and I don't really get why. He's always in foul trouble. He's not directly impacted from Damian Lillard in terms of the minute upside. It's just the usage with him. So at 7K, I'm not really buying it. I think you can easily pay down for like Robinson Earl. Makes a lot more sense. The minute upside's actually better for Robinson Earl. And I get it. Nurkic is a very good fantasy point per minute player. I just, the minute upside just always scares me with him. And it burned a lot of people last slate. So that is the direction right now. Those are my locks. And again, you can go in many different directions on the slate. I think there's so many elite value plays that are really flying under the radar here on the slate, which makes for a very interesting slate as a whole. And now let's focus on the ownership. I just want to recap everything that I stated. Simons is showing the highest owned. CJ McCollum, Shamet, Nurkic, we already talked about. I think it's a great place to get different tonight. Jaren Jackson's actually popping up, 7.1K. He's been just crushing it, staying out of foul trouble. And Cameron Payne is another guy that's showing some ownership here at 4.1K. Don't love the minute upside there, 23 minutes. However, we know with Booker out of the lineup, he's a great fantasy point per minute player. Followed by Trey Mann, Chris Paul, and then DeJounte Murray. But that will do it for my DraftKings recap. Let's now focus on my favorite prize pick entry for the slate. And it is going to be Robinson Earl over 21.5. That is far too low, especially if he does start. We have him projected for about 30 DraftKings points right now, which translates to about 28 PrizePicks points. Love that over on 21.5. And that will be my lock here for the slate. And if you guys haven't signed up for PrizePicks, go ahead and enter code using DGF for 100% match up to $100. And that will wrap up my breakdown, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this breakdown. If you did, please do hit that subscription button, notification bell, and of course, smash that like button for all of our future NBA content. With all that being said, have a great rest of your day, and let's cash.